Okay, welcome back to OpenFin's webinar series. Thank you for joining us this morning or afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from. Today, I welcome back Sebastian Goetz, CEO of Expiro, one of OpenFin's certified development partners. A first-time guest on our webinar, Josh Holden, who's a longtime fixed income trader and technologist with stops at Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and now CIO at OpenFin, and our very own co-founder and COO, Chuck Dorr. In today's presentation, we're going to unpack the design for strategies used to build OpenDoor's highly performant trading platform with a walkthrough of how Expiro and OpenDoor work together to leverage OpenFin to bring a robust, novel experience to the market faster. And with that, just a quick reminder that our chat and QAs are open. Please send us your questions there. And the webinar is recorded and will be available by the end of the day via our YouTube channel, which I'll place in a link in the chat for you. And with that, I am going to hand it over to you, Sebastian.
Cool, thanks very much, Mitra. I want to apologize in advance for all the times I'm going to confuse OpenFin and OpenDoor. In fact, we once did a version of this presentation at an open house, and that was just fantastic. So hopefully from the context, it'll be clear which of the things that we're talking about. So let me get our presentation going here. Great, so today, as Mitra introduced, I'll be talking a little bit about how Expiro worked to build this new platform with OpenDoor over the past few years. Josh will be sharing how the platform works, and Chuck will be chipping in on how OpenFin helps the experience work. And so with that, let's just start with an introduction to what is OpenDoor and what is their mission. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so I will also further apologize for any confusion between OpenDoor, the real estate trading company that's probably better known, and OpenDoor Trading, which is our U.S. fixed income trading platform, which is primarily used to trade bonds and not houses. So that's who we are. We really were founded to address a sort of a fundamental problem in the U.S. Treasury market, which is essentially that the U.S. government debt has been expanding quite dramatically and not really fit to for the protocols that were designed and sort of evolved over time. We can go to show the sort of scope of the problem on the next slide, which is talking about how since 2008, the size of the US government market has expanded dramatically, and sort of post-COVID, you could probably add another couple $1 trillion on top of this. So you can see that there is a market that was originally designed or evolved in a much smaller market size, and really the amount of trading hasn't grown with the amount of outstanding issuance. And so one of the challenges there is that the protocols are not necessarily designed. So OpenDoor basically has taken several ideas that have worked in other marketplaces. So we've seen dark pools work in the equity marketplace. We see examples like market access in the corporate bond trading space, where you see all-to-all platforms and dark pools, the combination of that giving users the ability to control the amount of information that they give up when they trade, that those protocols have been successful. And so we have adopted several of those for the US Treasury market. So fundamentally, we're addressing this specific problem, and we do that with several tools. So we have a trading platform that has basically been designed with the help of both Expiro and OpenFin, and it allows participants to come together anonymously. We have a pricing methodology that allows us to price the 350 plus US Treasury CUSIPs that are out there. This is one of the challenges that we'll get into in terms of how do we give this information to users that have logged in. And then we also are busy storing all of that information and having that data and analytics based on that data available. So that's sort of our historical database. So again, we are taking, I think, on the trading side, and the challenge here is taking a market where there are a lot of standards and a lot of conventions that have been developed, and trying to both standardize, but also make it flexible for users to be able to see the type of view that they want. We're bringing a lot of people together that typically haven't always interacted. If you think about the typical trade, it is a customer, meaning a large asset manager, think a pension fund or someone else like that, who is trading with in the secondary market with a bank. And that's typically how the market has traded for over 50 years. And typically it's been via that customer asking that dealer for a quote, or maybe several of those dealers for a quote on something that they want to buy or sell, and then taking the best one that they get and then moving on. We have sort of taken that and transformed that and made an all-to-all platform where those end user customers can now interact with each other. The dealers can also trade with each other, and we can have customer to dealer flow all interacting on the platform. Now that is a very big technological challenge. It's also a convention and sort of protocol challenge to make sure that everyone has the ability to see what they'd like to see. So we can just give you a quick a peek at what the platform looks like. This is our solution to said problem. But there's an error with it. So
let's try that again, guys. That's
okay.
Odd. It's because we practiced and made sure it worked before, Josh. I'm convinced that's the issue. There we go. Sorry about that.
So our solution to this this challenge is to basically create a very dynamic grid. There's 350 Treasury QSIPs that we trade, over 350. We have to give people the ability to enter orders, have confirms and pop-ups and dialogues, and all be very interactive. Meanwhile, we have to give people the ability to locate the bonds that they care about, see real-time pricing that's updating, and be able to interact from either of these views. When they trade with each other, we need to make sure that we're notifying people that trades are taking place, that they're aware that they're perhaps in a negotiation with someone, and this is incredibly important to be able to get the eyeballs of traders. And we'll talk a little bit about how we do that a little bit later on in the presentation.
Fantastic. So that was a little bit about OpenDoor, a little bit about us. We are a software and data products development firm. We do a lot of building of products and solving of interesting analytics problems, actually in a variety of industries, which we feel is a strength. We do a lot of financial services work, building things like OpenDoor, but can also kind of see and adapt patterns that we see elsewhere. In finance, our focus has particularly been on things like you're going to see today, a novel product from the ground up, like a trading platform, portfolio management, fund analysis, cash and treasury apps are some examples of work we've done. Some of those are truly greenfield projects, which you rarely have the privilege to do, like an OpenDoor, and more often they are inside a ecosystem that is also, being modernized, right? So we're building a new app or modernizing an existing app inside a front and middle office ecosystem, which, as we'll see today, is one of the reasons we're excited to work with OpenFin, because they solve a lot of problems that we find there. So anything from building sort of data science pipelines, data science and infrastructure and security and auditing, up to building multiple front and middle office apps and making them work together, mobile trading, and a lot of the DevOps in there. So really building and modernizing front and middle office is a lot of our bread and butter in financial services. And we've also in the last few years really done some interesting work in machine learning and graph or network analytics work in fraud, financial crimes, anti-money laundering, working with a couple really interesting customers, both explicitly inside financial services, such as bank AML groups, and actual sort of manufacturers, vendors, as they face fraud with their own credit card systems and such. We've been partners with OpenFin for some time. We've been working on the product you're going to see today for 4 years. And it's never gotten old. There's always something new and interesting to do. And finally, I just want to mention, we won't get into much detail about it today, but I think it's important to mention that OpenDoor is built with, yes, we helped build it. Almost all of their clients use it directly on OpenFin, but the back end that runs the trade matching and that integrates with the live markets and sends the orders out for clearing and all such things, it was supplied by Broadway, which is a tremendous fixed income software vendor, among other things. Up in New York. And usually one of the things I get to lament about when we talk about building systems in banks and capital markets firms is that if we don't get to participate in the back end, often we find that the back end data services and databases and warehouses and what have you can be a limiting factor for the front end. And it's nice that in this case, we were partnered with someone who was able to do such a nice job on the back end. So a lot of what you see today is also made possible by some of the nice stuff that Broadway's put in on the back end. Today, we're mostly going to talk about the sort of the front end experience. So the way today will work, you saw a very brief tour of the experience that Josh gave. And what we're going to do is just drill down to a couple of moments and show like a little video or a little clip. And Josh will talk a little bit about why it matters in the application, why we designed it the way we did. You know, OpenDoor has a lifetime of history in the capital markets and understands a lot about how traders think. We, Expero, do a lot of work understanding how to take that mindset and turn it into real experiences, and as developers, make those experiences work. So we're going to just choose a few of those moments and then explain how we made it from a usability or technology or platform perspective. So we're going to start with live updates. So Treasury market's the largest market on the planet. It's always moving. Not only do people need to see what's possible to do, they are bathing in a constant sea of price updates and ticks and maybe fast traders or slow traders, but need to interact with the platform. And so we have a little moment here for Josh.
Yep, absolutely. So you know, essentially, as Sebastian mentioned, you know, we trade over 350 U.S. Treasury CUSIPs. These are all up. Every one of them is updating in real time. Has, you know, somewhere between 2 to 8 relevant pieces of data that a trader would care about at any given time, including the price, the yield, so where that thing trades on a yield spread. All of these things are kind of updating constantly. We're managing sort of the back end streams that are coming in and calculating all these values in real time, again, with the help of Broadway. Those things, and being able to have something that is performant and able to display all of those prices and all those updates to people, even on securities that they may not be looking at the moment, but exist in the back end, in the background. It's really, I think, a testament to the good job that OpenFin and Expero have done in terms of being able to give all that information to people in a way that's, as I mentioned before, configurable, because not everyone looks at it the same way. So some people may want to look at different pieces of that data and not care about others. So that's a pretty critical component, and that's one of the things that our UI does.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about lots of different things that have to come together to make a trading platform work. And in this first one, I just want to touch on the fact that it requires pretty high performance. So in that demo, if you knew where to look, you saw prices ticking. This is not, you know, real time dig a fiber optic cable under someone's driveway type of application. But, you know, live updates are important. And over time, the volume of data that's being sent to each desktop, it really adds up. And this is, by the way, a protocol that stays open. You know, in the early days, these auctions lasted, you know, on the order of an hour, and now they're open all day. And so a trader could have this open for hours and hours and hours. It's not something that they bring up, press a button, dismiss. And so for us, it was really important as developers, and we've had to take a few shots at this over the years as the application became more and more large and had more and more data through it, making sure we were writing it to be fast. And so some of the key things that were success factors for us, again, on the left, first is the framework we built it with, which is React. Anytime you talk to developers about building a web app, you can enjoy a whole war of frameworks that is usually not worthwhile. There are lots of decent frameworks that help you get the work done. React is one of our favorites. It's the one we used here, and it's really nice for us because it lets us build a pretty rich interface with fewer bugs. People also talk about how it helps with performance, and it does. But for us, really, the ability to use that interface lets us program things functionally, programmatically. We get to say, make this look this way by these rules. And then the framework handles all the crazy intersections and corner cases of the rules to make the development largely bug-free. Now, in the 5 years ago when we selected this, we think React was sort of the best and one of the few that did that and gave you good performance. Over time, there's a lot of really nice new frameworks. Actually Angular itself sort of got reprogrammed to take a lot of these concepts on. Vue we really like, Svelte we like. There are some great frameworks now that, were we starting from afresh, we'd be happy to use as well. But certainly that choice of a good one made a big difference. Garbage collection is an interesting one. When you're sitting there looking at an application refresh for hours and hours with thousands of ticks going in, it's easy if you're not careful to just let the browser bloat. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, you just sometimes have to shut your Safari or your Chrome down and start it up again. And it's probably because someone sort of let some memory start going. And so it's just something to be conscious of as you're programming it and understanding how to use data structures appropriately so that you're not causing big delays as the browser collects its garbage as it works. And then really this is something that was provided to us by the Broadway platform. Again, in the last couple of years, a lot of platforms have started making this a little easier to use, but we've always got transactions open. A trade has been entered and the order may or may not match. Ticks are coming in, there's notifications. There's a lot of asynchronous messaging going both ways. And if you don't manage that sort of what's called full duplex, meaning asynchronous communications both coming and going, you can really get yourself in a mess. And so really for us, the ability to make this work and work fast and work reliably so that we can add features without getting tangled in a mess comes down to choosing some of these frameworks. There's an explicit question about are we considering Svelte, as is quite a bit faster, not doing VDOM comparisons. I think that's a reasonable question. Were we starting from scratch? We like it. We would certainly consider using it. Given that this is an existing application that's working great, it wouldn't be worthwhile migrating to that. But thank you for that question. And one of the most important reasons that it works well is that the engine underneath OpenFin, which 90% of the deployments are on, keeps getting updated. And to talk about that, I want to ask Chuck to talk about how OpenFin addresses performance.
Thanks, Sebastian. So yeah, you have to do everything right, from an application design perspective, right? You have to, build an application that's aware of its memory footprint, that's, that's kind of, targeting performance. But one of the great things about the modern web is that the engine itself is getting upgraded at a blistering pace, right? And I threw up this sort of ugly flow chart here to show you what the Chrome development process looks like. And what you're seeing there is 3 different major versions of Chrome, all sort of overlapping in the development process at the same time, right? So you've got, this is the current snapshot of Chrome development. So active work is happening on 85 from a support perspective, 86 because that's the next one. It's on beta, it's stabilizing, and then 87 is coming in dev, targeting mid-November. And so, one of the things that OpenFin invests a lot of time and energy into is keeping up with the Chromium project, right? And that's really important for performance reasons because they're constantly, making improvements to performance. But it's also really important from a security standpoint, right? Because as Chrome is used in the wild, right, security issues come up. The Chromium team fixes them, and for OpenFin to be able to flow those directly to our customers, for security, for performance, is really, really important. Another aspect that is sometimes overlooked is that all of these very modern tools, all the beautiful frameworks like Svelte, like React, they are assuming that they're operating in an evergreen browser world, right? So it's really important that you keep up to date with your applications, really build for the web, even when you're targeting OpenFin. And that way you're going to get, your applications running in an environment that is most similar to the bulk of the deployment for something like a React. Anyway, so OpenFin Chase is the Chromium team. We do 4 major upgrades a year. And so, we do Chrome 85, Chrome 87, Chrome 89, Chrome 91. With the COVID, we ended up getting a little bit shifted because their schedules shifted. But stable versions from OpenFin every other major Chrome release.
Yeah, and your point about the frameworks and indeed the whole JavaScript ecosystem expecting the latest builds is a really big one. And when we started this project in 2016 and went to market in 2017, OpenFin was doing a nice job of bundling Chrome, but they weren't as up to date, right, as you are now. It wasn't an explicit process to stay in lockstep. And and there were some exciting releases where we would want to upgrade to make our life easier or to do another more ambitious UI thing. And we would sometimes have to stumble before a release to fix some issues. Oh yeah, okay, if the user's on an older version of Chrome, then that particular library is going to struggle because it does X, Y, Z, so we need to patch it. And we did, but our life was much easier and enabled more ambitious work as soon as you did this. The previous CTO of OpenDoor, who has now retired, when asked what his favorite thing about OpenFin is, jumps straight to, man, when those guys started keeping up with Chrome, it was just fantastic, which I liked because it shows how much he understands that making developers happy is useful. This has been a really big deal for us. So another moment in the interface to talk about is the grid. So we highlighted the grid and how, because it's always moving and flashing, you have to be careful to program it intelligently, not to cripple your interface technology. But also from a usability perspective and from a design perspective, we want to talk about how we tackled some of it, because that universe of securities is relatively large and there's lots of kind of users that use it. So I invite Josh to talk a little bit about how we designed that grid and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So the grid has been designed to be very configurable and flexible. So you can take a view where you get to see all of the securities. The securities are bundled into sectors. You can literally turn those sectors on and off. They'll disappear from this rail here, and the actual bulk of securities in that sector will disappear. Typically, traders are trading, a sector, or maybe focusing on the short end of the curve or the long end. Maybe they trade tips. If they trade tips, then they care about some additional columns, data information that's updating in real time. If they don't trade tips, they probably don't care. So having the ability to both add and remove sectors dynamically, add and remove columns dynamically is critical. And finally, some traders just want to react, and they just want to say, look, add things to the grid when there are bids and offers in them, and I'll take a look at them, but I don't, and I'll look at anything, but I may not, but I don't want to just look at pricing, because I just want to react when there's actual trades taking place and I want to get involved or not get involved. And so that kind of flexibility to have a dynamic grid that's constantly able to reorganize itself based on what the trader wants to see and include things that the trader, the views that the trader has typically, that's really critical. And I think that, it is light years away from where the traditional trading applications have been. And I think it's been incredibly positively received by the marketplace.
Fantastic. So this is where I'd like to talk, in contrast to some of the really deep technical concepts about keeping it performant, talk a little bit about the process we use to design it, because without design, you just end up with a really beautiful wrong thing. And what do I mean by that? If you look at the application, I think it's clear, and we could identify a lot of small details about how the visual design works to make information clear, and the use of color and white space and stuff. And that stuff's absolutely critical. But it's really easy to build an application with a concern towards visual design and forget what's really important, which is not just the usability of it, but the usefulness of it. So who is using it, and what are they really trying to do? And when we start our design exercise for any sort of application like this, that's really at the heart of our goals. The OpenDoor and company have traders, have been traders, have traders they can talk to. They know how it should work. But if we can sort of divine the way that they're thinking, we're going to do a lot better job. And frankly, a lot of really tech forward, companies or development shops or IT departments struggle with this. And it's always a struggle within our company because engineers really like to start from the data model and logic and think out, okay, I have an order book, I have a list of securities, and I just need to sort of present those, and I'm going to put them in a grid and allow the user to sort them because that's what they are. They're just tables of data. And you'll get the job done that way eventually, but what you really want to do is think about it from the trader's perspective. What are they actually trying to achieve, and work that back towards the sort of underlying data model that you have to expose. And for us, one of the most important concepts is that we shouldn't just guess. And it actually, you know, was a challenge from time to time working with the Open Door crew because they have so many traders on board. They are traders. They have strong opinions about how things should be. And indeed, their help defining, you know, what their vision was absolutely key to putting it together. But we also pushed and succeeded several times over the years in also talking to, you know, their end users, right? I don't want to spend money on research. I already know what it should look like. Why don't you just tell me what my users are thinking? And so for us, it was really important to have a combination of both sort of the visionary, hey, this is a new protocol, new market, here's how we want traders to think perspective from Open Door, and the, okay, let's get out and actually talk to customers or potential customers and test drive some of these ideas with them so that it does make sense to them. And so just going to talk about a little bit about what we did with a few examples. One that Josh alluded to is that sort of the traditional trading application is often static, and that doesn't mean it doesn't do anything, but it's like, here's a list of the securities that you can work with and do a query, find the securities, do something with them. Sort of a horizontal paradigm. There's some filters. As we moved in time and added more securities, more types of securities tips and different maturities and such, you know, that list just got bigger and bigger, and it was clear that we needed mechanisms to be able to do what Josh was showing you earlier, filter by, you know, sectors and allow personal preferences to manage the view. And so we worked directly with users to understand which concepts would help more. So, you know, sort of thing we'll do typically is actually go interview them and use a quantitative methodology. You know, we can do this with 4 or 5 users. It's better than none. It's nice to do it with 10 or 20 users and literally show them. And you saw sort of 2 screenshots there before. We do a lot of different mock-up work. So it's much cheaper than building it in code. We mock it up and say, try to solve this problem, right? Try to find this piece of information on this screen. Is it easy for you? Is it useful? You know, is it satisfying? In some cases, we'll actually mock up the behavior in code so they can go click on it. And in this case, you know, there's sort of a horizontal scroll design, which was decent. And by the way, when you do these surveys, no one wants to make you feel bad. So no one ever gives you a 1 or a 2 or a 3. Getting a 6 or a 7 is basically them saying, I'm not so sure. And then in the vertical scroll design, we're getting like 8s and 9s across the board. And so even though it doesn't look very big, it's just sort of in our experience, that's a big deal. You know, the concepts we showed there were clearly much more interesting to the users and felt more useful. Similarly, you know, and all these features sort of combine with each other. What about that sector navigation that Josh was talking about? Basically, what maturities of instrument are you looking at? Well, originally in that sort of static list, it was a very sensible, like a filter paradigm, like click here to turn it on, turn it off, and sort of tabs across the bottom, if you will. And then one of our guys thought, well, what if it was actually like a scroll bar? If you could see the whole market and it was just organized by maturity or by sector, wouldn't it actually be kind of a scroll bar? Is that clever or is that stupid? And indeed, we also ask the same sort of numerical questions that you saw before. But whenever we do that, we also recognize, look, this is not, you know, we're not going to be surveying 100 million people. Pure statistics aren't the only answer. We also need, you know, focus group type answers. And so when we ask the questions, we also get, you know, their written response or their verbal response, right? In this case, a few people liked it on the bottom because it had been that way for something like the first year or so of Open Door. But most people said, gosh, that's actually better because now it feels like the actual, you know, maturity curve, right? I can kind of visualize how that works. It's more intuitive. So, you know, we did that. Lots of little things, and we won't go through all of them, but, you know, as an example, we moved the sector names into the grid to break up that long list of securities. We actually said, okay, let's chunk it out by these sector types. So 2-year benchmark, 3-year benchmark. And indeed, in this case, we had 5 participants that all said, oh my gosh, that's exactly how it should be. That makes sense. And so for us, it was a very conscious effort to not only try a lot of ideas, but to use sort of quantitative and qualitative discussions with our end customers to make sure we were capturing their preferences. So don't just design something that looks nice. Don't just design something that you're pretty sure is useful and your customer thinks is useful. Give it a test drive with some customers. And I think, those moments illustrated a really big pivot we made about 2.5, 3 years ago. But that technique continues through time as we continue adding more data and more visibility to the system. Okay, another moment to talk about. It's all great to look at the securities and see the blinky box blink, but you actually do need to put it in order and clear a trade at some point to make the system useful. And for us is also another design topic of how to enable the traders to enter those orders when in fact they all think about their bids and asks in different ways.
I think that's a great point. And yes, everyone is a little bit different, and there's sort of a traditional ticket-based method. But what we worked with Expro on, which I think is really nice, is the ability to have quick order entry where you can see the order that you're entering in line and in the context of the thing that you've been staring at. So here you have this grid view and you have the line and the piece of information, but when you go and click on one of these boxes, you can enter an order in line. We also, that's for the most common order type. We also allow people to enter different order types if they're sort of unique. Here is a outright order, which is less common, but you can still access that and put that in at a price and see this in the context of, okay, here's where the live market is, and here's the thing that I'm putting in. So we always want to reassure users that, again, as a dark pool, because we are calculating, a reference indicative price for people and letting people put in whatever level they want, we want to make sure they maintain that visibility and that touch with the market so that they feel like, yes, I understand the context of the market in which I'm entering this order. It gives them, I think, a lot more confidence that they're not just sort of firing things in the dark without really knowing, where the picture is. They can see everything updating in real time. That was the challenge that we addressed before. And here we have the ability to enter orders really in the context of those real-time updates. And that basically provides, I think, a virtuous feedback loop that says, okay, people get more comfortable with both our order entry and order management and the pricing that they see on the screen, because it all kind of comes together. And here you see those orders filling in sort of in the next to the market that you see live there.
So Josh, actually a question came in that this is the perfect time to answer. Murad asks, what is the scope of pricing available on OpenDoor? Are the transactions captured those executed only on OpenDoor?
Yeah, so absolutely. We're only aware of transactions that obviously take place on our platform where we match buyer and seller. So that's what we're aware of. We're also aware of the feeds that we have. We have many pricing sources coming into the back end that are combined algorithmically. So we basically calculate what we think is a reasonable reference curve. We put that out for people as a reference. That's what the live price and these yield spread columns are. But we don't hold people to that. We allow people to put in orders at whatever level they think is appropriate and negotiate with other counterparties that they may come across if they want to negotiate on a given security. We don't see transactions that take place, on a dealer platform or some of our competitors. However, we do have a stored tick database of every single price that we're updating in real time historically. And what that does is that actually provides a very nice context by which we can take trades that are done on our platform and compare them to where we think the reference pricing should have been at the time. We can demonstrate, I think, fairly clearly that we save our clients money over time by doing that, certainly on the trades they do on our platform. And when they're willing to share trades that they've done in different places and compare them to the pricing that we have available on our platform, we can pretty consistently prove that a mid-market execution on OpenDoor is going to save them money versus the price that they perhaps paid to one of the banks to get something done.
That's pretty cool. So to talk a little bit about how we helped in this design process, talk a little bit about, before we talk about what we call user research, talking to users about specific ideas. This is a step that usually happens one step before prototyping some of those ideas and asking quantitative questions about them, which is digging into the minds of the users. So some tools we use are one of which is called the mental model. So taking all the activities that in this case a trader would be carrying out in the course of their day, and you got the mental model wrong if your application is the whole thing, because these traders are doing lots of other things. They're looking at other apps, they're meeting with their customers, they're planning their portfolios, they're doing a million different things in addition to actually using the app that you're putting in front of them. And so we try to understand what that larger mental model is. And then typically when we see where that mental model overlaps the application, we might map specific patterns to it. Like, oh, they're going to be using the application to do this, but because it's part of their workflow that they execute only quarterly, we need to have sort of a help and guidance pattern that we're using, because they're going to forget how to do it every time because they only do it every quarter. Or here's something that they're going to be doing, literally staring at the screen for hours a day because they're sort of an active fast twitch trader. Therefore, it is worth us building a lot of sort of keyboard shortcuts or really in-depth controls, or even like an expert mode or something. So by trying to understand what they do in the context of their larger workflow is key to us. And often we'll end up documenting it like this in order to confirm it both with them and with our customer. And then, Josh alluded to it. I don't know if you have a couple examples you want to share, but often what becomes very clear once you look at this is that there's no such thing as a trader. There's probably at least 3 or 4 kinds of traders, and never mind that traders by nature are highly individualistic beings, but certainly they will have, very different kinds of behavior. And so in addition to the nice work that the Open Door team did in putting together the protocol itself to capture the different kinds of behaviors those traders are looking to execute, we also worked with them to make sure that the way those trades work and the way that those traders think about their actions are surfaced. And even though it's one application, it really serves multiple masters or multiple personas. And then finally, one of the things that became clear when we worked with this is obviously it's a pretty fast moving market, and there's a lot of change that can happen in it. New issuances are appearing all the time. And in fact, even new kinds of issuances. And so sort of a combined technical and usability point here where we could, and it's easy to go very overboard on this and get it wrong, but where we could, this interface is very data driven. And so as an example, when the US Treasury decided to offer 20-year bonds, Open Door was one of the first, maybe the first platform to be able to offer them, because it was a pretty straightforward exercise to jump into the configuration tools for the system, add the QSIPs, add the securities, and then just have them appear in this list and be executable for trade, because most of what you see here is data driven. You don't have to call up the programmers to add new kinds of securities. You might have to do truly new auction protocols or visibility options, but a lot of the basics are governed directly by data. All right, another point that I think is both important from a usability perspective and really highlights why we think this was really a nice thing to build on OpenFin specifically, was that a trader's desktop is really busy, and must be much busier now that they're all sitting at home with 1 or 2 screens and not the 8 that they're used to. And much as I'm sure we'd all like for our own trading application to be the one thing that those guys pay attention to, it's not. Their desktops are incredibly busy. They're looking at all kinds of research, other platforms. They're very focused. Getting their attention isn't easy, and being polite to their desktop isn't easy. And so there's a few things we did to try to fit in better into that mental model, one of which is notifications and alerts. So Josh, I thought you might talk a little bit about how we've designed these alerts and what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Sebastian mentioned, it's really pretty critical to get people's eyes on the application when you need it, but you absolutely can't rely on them staring at it all day long. And no one, screen real estate, this is perhaps the only overlap between Open Door and the real estate companies. We care about screen real estate a lot. We have to make sure that we're not intruding on people and overlaying their applications or being unnecessarily grabby of focus for example, that will get you in a lot of trouble very quickly. If someone thinks they're trading on one app and you say, hey, I need to grab your cursor over here, you will get yelled at. So so we designed several sets of alerts along with Expro, and OpenFin has helped us greatly in this regard as well, in that we have different types of alerts that are going to show up if we want to grab someone's attention and just say, hey, you know, by the way, something you care about has happened. A trade has taken place in these particular issues. Or perhaps, you know, you are in a negotiation and someone's improved their price to you. Do you want to accept it or do you want to counter them? All of those things are sort of can happen both in app and with desktop notifications. This is a particularly really nice feature that I happen to really like, is there's actually a timer. So, and it can vary. So for our in-app notifications, these little bars that you see sliding here are actually a countdown. So the notification shows up and we give you like a countdown or a shot clock to basically say, hey, this thing is going to automatically go away in a certain amount of time. So it kind of not only says, hey, you know, look at this, but look at this because you're about to lose this piece of information. And I think that the combination of those things helps people really focus on them when needed. These are also interactive, so very quickly, you know, we want to get, for a subset of the users that are sort of the more reactive types, we want to drive them to see something and react. I mean, I think typically traders will do that, or at least a subset of traders will do that. And they want to say, oh yes, I happen to be a buyer of that security. So I see that traded, I want to get involved in that trade now. Oftentimes it's about, you know, waiting for those liquidity events to happen. And then as people are starting to trade something, a clearing price has been sort of determined, and you want to get involved in that marketplace. So we allowed this sort of immediate click to trade from those notifications themselves, and I think that's been very useful for people. And then we have sort of the concept that we're working on, which is sort of how do we bundle those alerts up into notification centers. So again, not just are they popping up and disappearing, but maybe you did care about something that you saw some time ago that has expired. You still want to get involved in that. You still have some notification, the ability to see that. Here is another example you can see on the right here of some of those alerts coming up actually in the system tray. So, you know, in the COVID world, we lost, we went from essentially, as Sebastian, as you mentioned, you know, some people with 7, 8 screens going down to a laptop, right? So how do we, that means that our application is probably going to be minimized most of the time. So, so how do we then make sure that we're relevant in telling people when things that they care about are happening? Desktop alerts can do that. We can notify to the system tray, to the application, to the notification center, and you know, and I think that there's some more interesting stuff coming along these lines, and we're very excited with you know, in terms of talking about the realm of the possible with both Expro and OpenFin, kind of in the soon to come universe.
Awesome. And then another, so we did static screenshots for that, by the way, because unless you know where to look, the alerts kind of come and go, and it's a little bit hard to talk about them. Another really important aspect of the native sort of desktop experience is windowing, which we will show here briefly.
Yeah, and I can certainly, this is a key feature. I mean, this is something that OpenFin gives that is absolutely fantastic. You know, you can tear out parts of our application and you can put them anywhere on the desktop that you care about. It acts just like a native application in terms of those sub windows are torn out. You can see that we went from taking, you know, the entire desktop, an entire screen's worth of real estate, to starting to tear out subsections of the interface that you might care about, meaning this keychain, your order book, you might see to be able to monitor orders that you have that are live. And those act exactly as they do, you know, as you'd expect them to do. They act as these torn out windows, and you know, that is absolutely critical to get all of the sort of flexibility of having you know, a web-based application in terms of being able to push updates and everything else like that, with all of the functionality of basically a native application on the desktop, and that for users that's critical. That allows them to be more efficient. That allows us to be faster to respond when they have requests for things. It really is a tremendous feature.
Yeah, and so it's worth noting here that this platform, if you want to be an open door trader, you can do it if you just have a Chrome browser. We wanted to make sure it was as universal as possible. However, I believe 90% or so of the deployments are on OpenFin. And things like popping out windows, deciding where the windows are going to be, integrating with system alerts, to some extent, plus or minus, you can do those in a native Chrome interface, but it's often a mess. It's often, you don't have the control that you want. There's extra Chrome on the windows. They look a little scarier. They don't necessarily show up where you'd expect them to be. And so it's really been a big deal that we've been able to write code that works directly against the the OpenFin APIs, which Chuck's going to talk about in a little bit. But I did want to mention, just from a technical point, one of the reasons we have really liked as technologists, stepping away from the usability aspect of working with OpenFin, is that it's a really good citizen and it knows how to disappear. And so if you're a programmer, you probably appreciate why this is interesting. So, there's a lot for us to think about as we build the application. So we're integrating with pricing feeds, we're entering orders, all the things you've seen today. And the truth is, almost none of that really needs to know anything about what window it's in. I got a security screen, it should just render. And I shouldn't have to become, an OpenFin or a Chrome or any other kind of expert. I should be really confident with my React or, Svelte or whatever it is. I should work in my framework doing my thing. The few times where it is important that I be able to say, here's an alert, here's a notification, or in the example we just saw, here's a window I want to tear out, and here's how I want to coordinate messages between the windows. It's important that I be able to keep that as small as possible, because I don't want OpenFin references littered through all of my code. I don't want Chrome specific behavior littered all through my code. It's a maintenance problem, and it tends to produce bugs. You want to isolate things small, and it's been really great for us in that we can sort of have just these small components that say, okay, if I'm in OpenFin, I'll do these particular things, and it can be isolated to a pretty small body of code, and the rest of it just works. And also, our developers like to say that not only does it sort of encourage good design, but the guys have been really good about API design and also maintaining backward compatibility and being smart about API deprecations, such that the quote is literally, every time OpenFin upgrades, it's a non-issue for us. Like it's easy for us to keep up. So we can upgrade React and upgrade our Broadway connectors and all the things we do, and update OpenFin, and it's not an existential crisis. So it's just been a really smooth development experience. And so Chuck, I thought you might want to talk a little bit about what made that experience possible, and maybe where it's going.
Sure, absolutely. So, windowing is, of course, a really key part of native user experience on a trader desktop, right? Long-running applications that people are using, all day long to perform critical, critical work functions like trading, are not great as a 13th tab, getting buried, getting closed inadvertently, right? And so, the native UX usually starts with windowing, starts with an application really having the weight of a native application on the desktop, but critically in OpenFin, not the weight from a development and sort of technology standpoint. And so you saw there, how the windowing code can really be isolated, and we saw a lot of our customers doing that, and really liked the kinds of the kinds of separation of concerns between the content and the windowing environment. And so, our APIs, we constantly invest in evolving them. And so the latest iteration around windowing is what we call the platform API. And the platform API is really focused on taking 100% web content. So this is web content that would run in Chrome, right? And then it wraps it with a native user experience. So complex workspace management, complex layouts, windowing, all of that stuff kind of coming out of the box without you having to write any code at all, right? But really importantly, of course, you can then customize how everything looks, customize how it feels, and make that platform your own. And so, we saw our customers who were building, these platforms, and they needed a tool set to be able to do that, a tool set that helps them share context across all the different views within their application, all the mini applications that sort of make up the macro experience. And so yeah, so we're bringing a lot of that stuff to the party with almost no OpenFin code at all. So even less than what Sebastian was talking about there. And yeah, so this is these tabbing complex layouts, making it so that you can share those layouts really easily with other users. That's a big area where we're investing in the native UX.
Fantastic. And then I promise we will be done on time. Final point we're going to talk about today. We don't really have a demo for it because it's hard to demo, but a really important point here, and the reason probably 90% or so of OpenDoor's customers are on OpenFin, and why we push them to use OpenFin, preferentially, is that the development, which we talked about, because the nice API designs is sort of frictionless, as it were, and the deployment is frictionless. So that's really important. And so, I've heard many testimonials from OpenFin about how, customer X needs to be onboarded. Either they just install the OpenFin, the OpenDoor app with OpenFin container, and it just works, or it's a quick call to OpenFin and the support team does a nice job of taking care of it. And it's really important to note that being able to do that, so actually being able to deploy, develop something today, test it tonight, don't forget to test it, and deploy it tomorrow, is basically time to market. And Josh, I think you had an interesting example of why this was important for you guys. Oh, maybe we've lost Josh. Well, I'll share his example, which is they were in conversations with a large customer that was going to provide a lot of deal volume to their platform. The cool tech doesn't mean anything if no one comes to your party. And so the early years were really about bringing people onto the platform. And there was some specific new functionality that customer said that they wanted, new things to see, new orders to enter. And, we worked feverishly in a sprint to go do that over the course of literally just a few days and deployed it to their desktop. And, the answer was, the quote was something like, gosh, that was really fast. And you can imagine in a typical sort of IT-driven desktop-focused environment, getting a new release out, often is weeks or months, and it's got to be tested and scripted and installed, and installers and patches and all the things. And once the OpenFin is sort of trusted by that firm, because of the security updates and the nice containerization, all the hard work OpenFin does, we can just push our application updates into there really fast and without trouble, which is both good from a development experience and, quite importantly, from a dollar perspective, it's time to market. And I think, Chuck, you wanted to say a little bit about sort of the things that go into that experience in the few minutes we have here.
Yeah, so thanks for highlighting the fact that OpenFin's job here is actually to serve two masters, right? We've got developers who we want to provide great tools to so that they can build really rich, beautiful native applications. But again, the only way we can stay true to that promise of getting that stuff onto people's desktops quickly is to give tools for the desktop owners to manage the security environment on their desktop, and really be able to invest in a secure by default environment on that desktop, so that as vendors and as their own internal teams want to push updates, they feel like they can push those safely because there's a technology wrapper around everything that's being done that provides a baseline of security and compliance around the environment. So, we're building out a lot of tools for developers. We're building out a lot of tools for desktop owners. One of the things I say with this stuff is sort of good fences make good neighbors, right? That's what security is all about here. It's making sure that we all can do the things that we need to do on both sides of that fence, and collectively increase velocity of delivery, increase velocity of the sort of business value. So we're going to keep getting Chromium upgrades out quarterly. Really co-stable with Chrome. Continue investing in security. On the developer side of things, you saw the platform API. Really great stuff happening there around helping people componentize their applications, or even just take content that they already have and really bring it back into another application. So more the ability to assemble applications from content that you maybe have already invested time and energy into. Default user experience around the windowing, and of course support tools. On the desktop owner side of things, just a real focus on security and manageability. And that's really what the desktop owners need. They need to know what applications are running, who they're coming from, and the ability to honestly turn them on and off. We found that when you do give people the tools that they feel like they need to control their environment, they make intelligent decisions about controlling that. If you have a strong business relationship with someone, they're going to run your application. And having the OpenFin wrapper, the security wrapper around it, knowing that it's not your developers that they're trusting, but that that there is a standards-based sort of web wrapper, security wrapper around your applications, really can add to your ability to move quickly.
Fantastic. So just a brief pointer that I think we covered a lot of material today. It was much more comfortable doing it in an hour than it was in the 15 minutes we attempted at that open house back in January. But really, each of these things has to combine with each other, right? So performance matters, doing design first thinking, and really researching, knowing your users before you do your design. And I think particularly for the front office user, having a desktop native experience have all combined to be important elements of making the trading platform work. So thank you guys for your attention. We're going to finish just before the hour. I've answered one question here, but I'm sure Mitra and the OpenFin team can find a way to funnel questions or shoot them here to this info@Expiro Inc. And we've enjoyed talking with you. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Sebastian.